I will be brief, for my short date of breath is not so long as in a tedious tale. Romeo, there's dead, was husband to that Juliet, and she, their dad, that Romeo's faithful wife. I married them, and their stolen marriage day was Tybalt's doomsday, was ultimately death. Banished the new home-made bridegroom from the city, for whom, enough for Tybalt, Juliet pined. You, to remove the siege of grief from her, betrothed and would have married her perforce. To county Paris, then she comes to me, and with wild looks bid me devise some mean to rid her from the second marriage, or in my cell there would she kill herself. Then gave I her, so tutored by my art, a sleeping potion, which so took effect as I intended, for it wrought on her the form of death. Meantime I writ to Romeo, that he should hither come as the dire night, to help to take her from her borrowed grave, being the time the potion's force should cease. But which he borrowed my letter, Friar John. We stayed by accident, and yesternight returned my letter back. Then, all alone, as the prefixed hour of her walking, came I to take her from her kindred's vault, meantime to keep her closely at my cell, till I conveniently could send to Romeo. But when I came, some minutes ere the time of her awaking, her ultimately laid, the noble Paris and true Romeo dead. She wakes, and I entreated her come forth, and bear this work of heaven with patience. But then a noise did scare me from the tomb, and she, too desperate, would not go with me, but as it seems, did not violence on herself. All this I know, and to the marriage her nurse is privy, and is off in this. Miscarried by my fault, let my old life be sacrificed some hour before this time unto the rigor of server law. The soliloquy I chose means Friar Lawrence is talking to Prince about what he did on the marriage of Romeo and Juliet, and he tells him he is going to be brief because of his short date of breath, and it's not going to be like as long as a tedious tale. So he talks about how Romeo and Juliet are at the moment. For example, he says, Romeo, there's dead, was husband to that Juliet, and she, their dead, their Romeo's faithful wife. So he talks about how they are, and he says like it's a little bit his fault because now they are miscarried. So yes, that's what it means. In this point in time, the Friar Lawrence he feels a little bit guilty because, and we can notice this by when he says miscarried by my fault, let my old life. So when he uses the word fault, we can really notice that he is feeling guilty. Um, okay, so the soliloquy fits into the events happening in the scene really good because it really talks about like the marriage of Romeo and Juliet, which and like their death because it's like really talking about this in this scene. And like the main events occurring in this act is like their death. So that's why the soliloquy has a lot to do with the act. I chose this particular soliloquy because I think it really like shows the feeling of Friar Lawrence and the attitude like he used like to both Romeo and Juliet. And I think also this the things that he says really like comes to our mind and we can really make connections to things that happened in the past and we can use flashback. That's why I chose this soliloquy. What I most learned during our work with Romeo and Juliet was about how both families, Montague and Capulet, like they handled the situation because like I never knew how this really worked. And I think for me it was very challenging to read the book because there was like lots of words that I've never heard before or ever seen, and they were really hard to pronounce. So like while I was reading, I was like in doubt about what did the word really meant, and like does it relate to the context. And I really enjoyed reading this book, and I think it was like a very cool unit, the one that we worked with Romeo and Juliet, because it's really made like me think about like how would I deal with the situation. I know it's like very a fantasy, but it made me make some connections, so I really enjoyed it. Okay, so I am reading an extra soliloquy, and it is on page 64 and Act 3, Scene 5, and who's saying is Lady Capulet. God's bread, it makes me mad. Day, night, hour, tide, time, work, play, alone, in company, still my care hath been, to have here matched, and having now provided, a gentleman of noble parentage, of fair damages, yoful, of noble trained, stuffed, as they say, with honourable parts, proportioned as one thought would wish a man, and then to have a wretched pulling full, a wind and mammoth in her fortune's tender. To answer, I'll not wed, I cannot love, I am too young, I pray you, pardon me. But, Anne, you will not wed, I'll pardon you. Grace, where you will, you shall not house with me. Looked to think on't, I do no use to jest. Thursday is near, lay hand on heart, advice. And you be mine, I'll give to you my friend, and you be not, hang, bed, starve, die in the street. For my soul I'll ne'er acknowledge thee, nor what is mine shall never do thy good. Which trust bethink you, I'll never be forsworn.